All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're live on MythVision podcast. I have a special treat. We'll just say an ex-Christian apologist who left Christianity but has not left the idea of God. And we're going to have a wonderful discussion today. So make sure you stay tuned, subscribe to his YouTube channel, and be ready for a fun ride this morning. I hope you're all doing well.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MythVision. Tyler Vela. Is it Vela?
Vela.
Vela. Welcome to MythVision, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's get right into this, right?
Yeah.
So first thing I want to do is let everybody know. I thought I was sharing the dang screen. Here we go. Sharing the screen now. Subscribe to Tyler's YouTube channel. He has announced that he has deconverted from Christianity. And so go check out his channel. Go subscribe. He's at 1.05K subscribers. Let's see those numbers grow and show some love to the community. When someone is willing to push the boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable, I think it's important that we pat people on the back for doing things that, seem to be an honest approach to the material. And I really listened to your deconversion, and it seems more of an intellectual pursuit. It's not you just want to go sin and be a bad boy, but it's a lot of the accusations I see or get, that you were never really one, the true Scotsman fallacy, right? So there's all these issues. No true Scotsman. You also have a podcast.
I actually get that. I get that one. We can come back to that, but I actually understand that comment. We can come back to it.
Yeah. You're coming in a bit hot. I don't know if it's the audio or the audio is a little loud, but I don't know if there's a way to turn it down just a smidge, or is it just so that we're all, I don't want to blast it too loud. We got the Patreon while he's working on that. Make sure you guys check us out, help support us. We've got more stuff coming. Of course, we always take deep dives into the biblical text, mythology, legend, the whole nine. And we have courses. If you haven't signed up for those courses, I've got right now, and I'm working on more, Creating Jesus, Why Mark's Gospel Was Forgotten. It's been buried beneath Matthew, Luke, and John in the way that people understand the New Testament. The Historical Jesus Quest. This is an amazing course. And then Ancient Greek Mysteries with M. David Litwa. We've got more stuff coming. So check out the description. But again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Freed Thinker with Tyler Vela. And I'm going to refresh this at the end so that we could see those numbers climb. That's the whole goal today. Please, if your mods are in the chat, do me a favor and, remind people when they come tuning in. Tyler, what happened to you, my friend?
What happened? Is it still hot? I
That's
only have
better.
one microphone. Is that better? All right.
It's a little bit quiet. I'm not going to lie, though. It's just a smidge.
All right. We went the opposite direction. All right. Hold on.
Just a smidge. I want people to really hear you.
Is that one better? Worse?
It's hot, but you know what? I'll go with hot before not. So let's just go with hot.
This is why I'm hot. All right. I can sit back a little bit.
Yeah.
See how it goes. Yeah. So what happened? I, over the last 2 years or so, I started to have just an erosion of belief on some things. Things just started not adding up, and I started finding that all of the explanations that I had for things. I did apologetics for 20 something years, and it just started to kind of become a mountain of kind of ad hoc explanations for things. And like, if you look at them individually, that might work, but it just started to become, a tower to the heavens, so to speak, of really kind of contorted explanations after a while. And it just eventually caught up with me. And there was a good amount of time after I really struggled with a lot of beliefs and a lot of the doctrines of classic Orthodox Christianity,
right?
That I was like, I'm really struggling with doubt. I'm not really believing it. I started talking to a lot of people, and it was almost like a Pascalian, hey, like, you're on the fence, you're struggling with doubt, it's dark night of the soul. Like, really, you stay faithful. And so there's a sense where, I did the Pascalian thing where it's like, I lean in, I have faith. I'm kind of, because I think Pascal, it's not an argument for God. I always thought that it was an argument. It was a call to the will. It was a volitional thing. It's a you're deciding what you're going to be committed to and aligned to. And so I was like, okay, well, this could be a dark night of the soul. This could be whatever it is. I was going through some personal life things. And I was like, I'm just going to, double down and remain faithful. And I'm going to be, committed. And I probably read the Bible more than I ever had, committed more Bible scripture to memory, took more classes, taught more things. Like I prayed way more. Like I just really doubled down on all of that to try to remain faithful. And then it's been probably 6 months now or so, 5 or 6 months, somewhere right around there, where even that, like, that faith commitment ended. So that's when I was like, okay, like, I now don't have the belief, but I also now don't even have the wherewithal to commit to continue on this just faithful commitment, kind of this volitional commitment. So
then for our audience, because they don't know your past, what were you believing? What was your position? Because, by the way, no matter what you say and what you do, this from experience already, you're going to get pigeonholed by some Christians somewhere. It wasn't the right Christianity. It wasn't this. I'm safe from any scrutiny. But what did you believe?
Yeah, so I was. You and I came from similar backgrounds. I was a Reformed Presbyterian. I was actually ordained in the PCA. I was an ordained ruling member of the PCA.
People don't realize how conservative the PCA was in terms of, but go ahead.
Yeah, the PCA is a very conservative Reformed denomination, Reformed Presbyterian. I mean, it's not, they're not like, independent fundamentalist Baptists. We're not like, KJV only. There might be some in the PCA that are, but it's very, very, it's not a normal thing. The PCA is actually, they do have moderates in there. Their big issue that they're having right now at their General Assembly is ordaining homosexuals. So like, it's not like they're like, the most like staunch conservative, whatever, but they're very theologically conservative. Like, you hold to the Westminster standards. Reformed, Calvinist, covenantal, very, very presuppositional.
What is the chief end of man?
To glorify God and enjoy Him forever, right? So, I mean, I taught through the Westminster standards for years. So that's the tradition that I came out of.
Awesome. Real quick on that note, though, like, you're right. There's like differences of opinions. I came out of a particular group of them in North Carolina, and I don't know if you've heard of Andy Webb. It's a pretty large group. You know who Andy Webb is?
I do know who Andy Webb is, yeah.
Okay, so that was my pastor who excommunicated me.
Okay.
And so they're very conservative in that particular group. They literally tried to get my wife to quit working that they were going to pay our bills till I could get a substantial job and make her stay at home the whole nine. And they were like showing up at my house on Sunday saying you broke the Sabbath, that kind of stuff. So they would appear at the house. So I would put them, and they would argue even in church on Sundays against these groups that are trying within the PCA to go and say, hey, same sex or people being ordained that are not supposed to. They're very conservative in the group.
Yeah.
There's a fraction within PCA happening.
Yeah.
So
and there's actually, I mean, there's several. So like within the PCA, there's that, which is, very, very, very conservative, fundamentalist, very, very, very traditional. Where I was, and it could be the fact that I was in California. So like even California conservatives are like moderate, like left of moderate for a lot of Southern conservatives. Like I remember I went to Moody Bible Institute, and I remember going and being like, you guys are even really like I'm an uber conservative in California, and you all are, wow, like, okay. So it's there is a little bit of that. But yeah, so that's my background. That's where I came from. My channel was, I did a lot of biblical theology, systematic theology, and apologetics. My background was in philosophy. My undergrad was in biblical theology. And my, I'm actually still halfway through my master's at Reformed Theological Seminary. I've obviously stopped doing that. I actually stopped about a year before I was done, maybe 2. My last class. I was going to pick it up again, but have
you been excommunicated?
I voluntarily left. I didn't have to get excommunicated. I voluntarily removed myself from the rolls.
Got it. So did you have to sign anything? Because they sent me like documentation to excommunicate me.
I haven't signed it yet, but I told them like I need to. I'm still in that process, but yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's a voluntary one. They don't have to excommunicate me. So
let's get into the fun stuff, right? I wanted to give a little background for people, so they understood where you're coming from. I wanted to show the YouTube channel again, so people will subscribe. We are checking back at the end of this to refresh and see how many count. I like to count and see how many we can get you to grow.
It's like a walk jogathon, you gotta.
Yeah. It's, let's see what we can do in terms of growing the platform. Tyler, what are some of the arguments? What are some of the things that you had a problem with that led you out of Christianity? Give us some details.
Yeah, I had a lot actually, and they started to accumulate and grow. So, and I realized in telling about and kind of coming out of my deconversion, I've realized that for me, the order that makes sense isn't necessarily like the way that the story should be told, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So, I've been kind of telling it from the tail, from the end and going reverse order. So I've been focusing on the problem of hiddenness, because the problem of divine hiddenness was the thing that like sealed the deal for me. That made me like give up even like being faithful anymore. Because there was a sense where it's like, look, like I'm a in the terms, I'm a non-resistant, non-believer at this point. I am actually proactively doing everything I can to be faithful, to pray, to read the Bible, not in the works, like not even in the like, God, you owe me anything, but just like I'm doing everything I can to have this relationship. And still, on my channel, I said, still it's crickets. Like I still have nothing. And so, if God wanted to have some type of relationship with me, that would have been the easiest time. I'm not asking for miracles. I'm not asking for money, healing, nothing. I just literally want, it could be, I remember like begging and saying like, it could literally be an intrinsic, the Mormons call a burning of the bosom. It could be anything that I could just internally know that I could never defend to an atheist. I don't care. I just want something that I know that you're my heavenly Father and that you love me. That's it. Like that, or that you even care, or that you're, in anything like that. And so, it's, so that was like the final straw. And I've been telling it from that point and working my way backwards, but really I'm realizing as I'm having conversations, because people are like, oh, well, you're just going on emotion and giving up. And I'm like, no, that was like the final straw, like everything else that led up to it. So the things that actually started leading up to it, ironically had nothing to do with Reformed theology and Calvinism. I mentioned this to you before the show. I actually think as far as systematic theology goes, if you're going to hold kind of an inerrantist view, a view of the scripture as like a comprehensive message from one divine author with, human authors as writing it down, all that kind of stuff with the Chicago Statement of Inerrancy and all that. I actually think Reformed Calvinism is the most consistent way you're going to do it. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, like there's something fundamentally wrong with that, and so now I can go look at, open theism or Arminianism. Like those were worse. Like if I'm going to take the Bible seriously, those are worse ways to do it. but it started being fundamental contradictions between what I believed about God because I'm still a classical theist. I still think God is omnimax. I still think God is simple, ase, necessary, right? I still hold to those types of beliefs.
Right.
There was actually a strong disconnect between that very high view of God and the very national pagan Yahweh of the Old Testament, and even getting into the New Testament, the way that Jesus looked at God and religion. It was very, obviously in the Old Testament it became very tribal. It was very very tribal, very this world. And as I started reading through, a bunch of the other myths of the ancient Near East and other ones, which honestly made me love the Bible more. You mentioned this. You love the Bible.
Yeah, I love the Bible. Of course, I want people to realize that. But yeah,
I still love the Bible. I think it's literally it is the master. Like, it is a pinnacle of literary mastery. When you start getting into the chiasms and the theme development and like everything, like the people who loves like multi-series, I always compare it to like Doctor Who. The people who love Doctor Who, and because they love it, because a joke will start in like season 1 or like back in the 60s, and it'll keep coming through, and like you see these themes go. It's just brilliant. Like the Bible, that like it's literarily beautiful. It's amazing.
I love it. But yeah.
And it's so fascinating and interesting, and how it's impacted culture. I mean, I love it. But also at the same time, there were certain things where I was like, not only does this high view that I think is philosophically defensible, and like I have a hard time, understanding how classical theism wouldn't be true because of certain arguments, that just came into conflict with the Bible. And so as I started reading these other myths, like those two systems clashed.
Okay, we got to zero in on this. This is a really, really good point here. And I read books. Like I said, I love the Bible. One thing that's happened since deconverting for me and learning more is that I'm also falling in love with the stories that are not just biblical. I'm finding like I would have never, as a PCA guy, loved diving into Greek mythology or getting into ancient Near Eastern stuff or the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like, I just would not have found the value of it. I'd have been like, oh yeah, mythology, but like the stories I love. So you have an ancient Near Eastern deity that has evolved. As you know, they're trying to make that the Platonic. They're trying to make this the god of classical theism over time. Yeah. And that clashed the biblical, because you're a biblicist, right? So you're somebody who reads your Bible, you know what's in here, and you're going, okay, hold on. What we've been saying about God philosophically and what these texts say are not the same. So you started realizing that's not this God.
It's not the same. It doesn't line up. It doesn't match. And actually, there's a weird irony, because in one sense, the open theists, like the rise of the open theists and the process theologians, like I always joke. I'm actually being somewhat serious, although it's a little snarky way. I actually think open theists, their view of God is like a mega Zeus. Like their view of Yahweh in the Old Testament. I mean, I don't know how you can get much more pagan of a view within kind of Christian theology. I mean, because he's finite, he's in time, he makes mistakes, he learns, he adapts, he can't always get his way. Like, he has to do these things in time. Using like it is a Zeus story. It's just a mega Zeus because he's bigger and more powerful and somehow transcendent and more good. He's not as, he's not going to come down and like in the form of someone and like seduce a woman and sleep with her, right? So you lose some of the shape. But then again, like when you start studying like Greek mythology, it's also not clear that like for a long time that the Greeks even believed that those were true. Like they kind of understood for a long. There's a lot of scholarship to show that they kind of thought that those were myths too. They didn't think that Zeus.
Yeah, the philosophers did. Let me ask you a question, because I want to make sure our definitions are right here. You use the word pagan multiple times, just so that we're properly defining this. Because when I research in scholarship, the term is a fuzzy one.
It is.
Usually, I'll use it to kind of refer to, when I use pagan, I'll put it in quotations to say I'm saying non-Jewish or something like that. But the way you're describing it, it sounds like you're saying the god that looks like the Zeus, like the other demigods in the world. So is that how you're defining pagan?
Yeah, so I would use pagan, and I should be clear, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense.
Right.
I did when I was a Christian to be
Right.
honest. I don't mean it in a derogatory sense. It's a helpful taxonomy. It's these very a pagan view of God, and you could put it in quotes. It is a little bit fuzzy, but a pagan view of God is a very this cosmosy idea of a God. It is going to be, you know, they are kind of part of the warp and woof of the fabric of, I can't even say the fabric of creation anymore, but the fabric of reality. Like they're kind of like just really big us's.
Yes, and that's actually the ancient Near Eastern concept of gods. So,
that's exactly
so we're
right.
on the same page. I just wanted to make sure I understood you right with that.
Yeah.
By the way, Camille Gregor's in the house, and he says, if there was a button that would wipe all memory of your deconversion and make you wake up a Christian, or wake up the Christian you used to be, would you push it?
No, that's a good question. No, because as of right now, I believe that it's false. And so I wouldn't intentionally force myself. I wasn't like happier. Actually, you know, this is, I don't talk about this one that much. I did a little bit in my first video.
I love where this is going, by the way.
Yeah. Part of what came about in my deconversion was, without going too personal, I went through some things in my life, and then I went on kind of like a finding myself as existential as as you know as that sounds, but you know I really worked on myself to become a person that I'm very comfortable in my skin, who I love being. I mean, I was never like super not that before, but there was tension, and there was a lot of ways I think where I had suppressed some of like myself within Christianity for various reasons. And so I'm actually
brother. I relate.
Yeah. So like there's actually a sense where I'm much more like authentically and holistically myself after this conversion. So it's not even like I missed the bygone days, where I had like, you know, hope and happiness and all that kind of stuff. Like that wasn't necessarily my experience back then. I mean, it was in some ways. And I think in those moments I would have said that it was, but looking back, I don't think that I would. Although I will confess, I am like, if someone could convince me that it was true, right? Not I could just wipe my memory and go back, but right now I know that I'd be believing something about. If someone could convince me that it was true again, I'd be totally fine with it. Like I'm not. Yeah.
Thank you for the super chat, Camille, and thank you for answering that. So you have this. We'll use the term pagan, ancient Near East is what I like to say, but there's an evolution. God evolves, and so. And if this God is active in the world, it's kind of weird how it always models itself with the mind of the people at the time. And eventually philosophers getting more sophisticated, they reckon, even the biblical ones, New Testament and later exegetes are like, we have this God that is not the depiction of Yahweh that we see in the biblical text. In fact, you got like early church fathers like Justin Martyr who actually want to say Aristotle, some of these philosophers that were pagan, I'll say, but they weren't pagan in the definition, so to speak, that you're saying. They actually would think of more of like a higher Platonic God that is perfect form and all that. So like they called them Christians. Some of these early church fathers were calling these non-Jesus followers Christians because their model of God philosophically was starting to change.
And it was in line with the model of God. Now, they would push back because then, obviously Aristotle and stuff wasn't saying that Jesus is the unique Son of God and all that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but what they viewed kind of the ontology sans the Trinity or whatever that is, what those what are called in systematic theology the incommunicable attributes of God. Right. Those were very much present in kind of those pagan philosophers that they were dealing with, those the Platonic philosophers. So it's very much present.
So God, you smack dab in the face of God of the Bible, and you're now like at conflict. Is this an early stage or is this like a late stage in your deconversion?
No, this is one of the early stage. So it's strange. I was not a young earth creationist for very long. When I first became a Christian, I was like, oh, well, that's just because where I was saved out of, young earth creationism, like that was just what Christians did. So I was like, okay, like I'm going to go along with it, but it's, whatever it is, what it is. Quickly, that phase did not last very long. Went to kind of just like I don't really know, I don't know what to do with it, but I did a whole research project and came away basically thinking, and I still think that the most likely thing that's happening in Genesis 1 is that it's an ancient Near Eastern temple text. Right. Right. It's not talking about material creation, kind of like a John Walton type of view, mixed with, So kind of a mix.
A whole nother. Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a Kleinian like framework theory. There's a whole bunch of things going on there. But I did a whole series on that. But what I think what that did was that, it trained me to also that's where I got a lot of my training and hermeneutics and understanding ancient Near Eastern context and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people be like, oh, well, your view of Genesis 1 is the thing that did you in. And indirectly it might have, because it's the thing where I was like, okay, but like good historical hermeneutics dealing with the history and the grammar and the context and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. When we start employing that kind of across the board, that's when we start that, that hermeneutic is the thing that I think started kind of doing me in, not necessarily just isolated my view of Genesis 1. Right. So that started to go through, and we go, and when you start looking through the ways and polemics can only get you so far. Although I think there is polemics that are happening in Genesis 1. I think there's polemics that's happening in the Exodus cycle and the plagues and the strong right harm is one of my like favorite polemics in the scripture. So, there is a bunch of that stuff that's happening, but that hermeneutic of reading things within their historical context and seeing that the way that the biblical text is actually interacting with those things, and then carrying that forward into the New Testament and seeing the way that they're interacting with the literature of their day, and how Mark is actually, there are all these theories about what they're interacting with and Homeric myths and all that kind of stuff. I don't go necessarily that far, but I think Mark, the Messianic secret is a very interesting kind of inversion of what's happening with the announcement of a Caesar. It's actually showing that he's the humble king, right? So there's all these kinds of like interactions that are happening that don't necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily mean that Christianity is false or that the Bible is false, right? You can, and I did for a long time. I read these as, that's just, kind of a Mike Laconian, that's the literary genre that they're doing, and that's okay. But those types of things just start to build and build and build and build and balloon until there's so many of them that it becomes a point that it's like, okay, there's so many of these and it addresses almost everything, that at what point do I think that any of this is actually true anymore? It's interesting and it's fascinating, and
I love it.
Things.
Yes.
But at what point does any of this now like matter for salvation anymore?
Right. So did it steal the magic away in a different way? I mean, the faith magic, like is there a sense where you're kind of like, I'm actually grasping the literature now. Like I get what they're trying to do. I saw behind the curtain. I love it for what it is now, but I don't see how this is abracadabra for me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting that one of the things that really did me in and kind of turned the tides when it comes to seeing the biblical contradictions and not trying to harmonize like the Gospels anymore, which is big. That's a big thing. When you can stop trying to harmonize every single passage, once that shift happens, I'm sure you're smiling. I'm sure you get this feeling. Once that shift happens, you're like what was completely reasonable. And I still say it, like, I get it. Like, I don't necessarily think it's a bad way to think about things. Like a lot of times we try to understand things in the context of things that we think are more true. It's not intrinsically bad to hold beliefs simply because they are the most consistent with other things that you do have a warrant to believe. I don't think that's a bad reason to hold. It's just not a strong reason. And once that goes away, you start looking at a bunch of the things you're believing, and you're like, well, now it's like a domino. Now that this one anchor thing that made all these other things consistent is gone, once that's gone, well, crap, like all the other 100 things domino after it and are gone. So the thing that did me in, actually, the domino, was because I love the literature. I love it. And I love the theme development. And I love like understanding what was Paul's theme of election in Romans.
Right.
And I listened to a talk by with Bart Ehrman, because you have to, whether you like him or not, right? We both like him, whether Christians like him or not. But I remember listening, and he was like, "Look,
who is he again? I'm sorry.
Yes, who is he? Bart Ehrman, right? So
okay.
yeah. So when he was talking about how if you take it was the time of the crucifixion between Mark and John.
Right.
And if you try to harmonize those, you actually destroy the theme of Mark individually and John individually, because John has him as the sacrificial lamb. Right. It has to be the day of preparation for the Passover, because that's like that. If you break that, you break a major theme in John, right? You break it. If it's not Passover, you break the messianic secret in Mark, right? So like if you harmonize them, you're creating a third gospel. Bart Ehrman's famous for saying this. You're creating your own gospel, but you are breaking the two gospels. You're not harmonizing them and keeping them. You're not keeping them harmonious. You're actually breaking the original data. And the original data is beautiful. They're brilliant on their own. They just can't be harmonized and stay brilliant.
That is such a good point. And later on, you have the diatessaron. They're trying to do some fixing of a problem. But I don't want to get caught up in that as much as just pointing out, I love what you said here. And you went right for the jugular. You didn't play around with the baptism narrative, because there's a problem with that. I mean, every single narrative has this kind of issue. Whatever is being left out by Matthew and Luke, it seems for reasons they don't want that, or they're changing things. Like in Matthew, John the Baptist begs Jesus not to baptize Jesus.
Yeah.
Hint, hint. And Mark, it's just, yes, baptize him. And like, there's not this issue, and it's for the forgiveness of sins. Whoa, Jesus, what? Yeah. So like, there's all these issues, and Christians don't notice this because they can run. In fact, recently in a course I've been promoting with Dr. James D. Tabor on Mark, he wants people to read Mark as Mark. And he points out how in Mark, when he finally goes, who do men say that I am? Okay. Peter finally goes, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. Okay. Yeah. 2 verses later, he doesn't say, blessed are you, the Father in heaven revealed this to you. That is not in Mark. Right. Christians immediately go, James is of the devil. I mean, like, I've had comments like crazy, Tyler. Yeah. And what he says 2 verses later, because he tells them in what he's going to die. He says, hey, you said I'm the Messiah. I have to die, right? Yeah. Then he's saying, no, you are not going to die. He rebukes him and says, Satan, get behind. Yeah. Okay, so like, what the heck is going on in Mark? Matthew wants to go, blessed are you, Father in heaven has revealed this to you, not flesh and blood. Well, that is a change that is radically different than Mark. And you went to the jugular. My point, before we get to the super chat by Camille again, Camille is showing some love this morning. Is the pinnacle of Christianity, the resurrection. And if we can't even get the story of the God of the universe in flesh, as we like to understand it, we can't even get that nailed down accurately. How reliable, how trustworthy can we really say our New Testament is on depicting what really happened? Yeah, this is a question. You can find ways to reconcile if you try hard enough, but this is a sincere question, right, Tyler?
It is a sincere question, and I will, I'll try to be brief, because I know you want to get this.
No. Take your time. We'll get.
But I haven't fully jumped ship or anything, right? So I'm not out here being like, the Gospels are just like. And I'm not saying you're saying this, but like the Gospels are entirely myth, or because they get one little detail wrong, you get everything right. You could go like a Lacona route, right? You could go down there and you could say, okay, well, these are minor discrepancies and all that kind of stuff. You could remain a Christian. You could be a progressive. You could be a Randall Rouser, and you could say, okay, they get the gist right. They're still reliable. I don't think that my girlfriend, when she, doesn't get the time, or, her and her friend get the time, 5 minutes off or a day off or something like that. What happened 30 years ago, they're told, it's all garbage, right? That wouldn't be the argument that I would make. But what it does is it says, okay, what can't be the case is, like, I don't see how inerrancy can be the case anymore. I don't see how infallibility can be the case anymore. And when your systematic is built on that, and when you're done trying to harmonize it, what happens is those anchor points come loose, right? And so there's a trickle down effect. And so you start looking at it. So like, I still look at the Gospels, and I'm like, okay, like I think the Gospels are probably generally reliable about what an apocalyptic teacher thought. I think they're probably close to what he was teaching his disciples. they almost certainly theologized like crazy.
Yeah.
They almost certainly slanted it towards the theological inclinations of the communities that they're writing for. They're almost, there's all that stuff's happened, but I'm not out there trying to say like, therefore it's entire, you can throw the entire thing out. And the reason why I think this is important, and then the last thing on this, the reason why I think this is important is because what I find now, and I started to see this when I was still in apologetics, but it's like full force now. There's a Mott and Bailey fallacy that happens a lot in apologetics, where in order to defend like minimal facts resurrection, or even maximal facts resurrection, or inspiration and inerrancy of scripture, they defend reliability, right? And they're like, oh, well, they get this like minimal reliability of, oh, well, they get cities and places and
geography,
and
yeah,
except for when they don't, because like Quirinius. But even Josephus gets things wrong sometimes, right. And we're not like, to hell with Josephus, get that guy out of here, like, whatever. But like, what happens though is they say, see, it's reliable, therefore we can trust all these resurrection stories. And I'm like, right. That's such a Mott and Bailey. Like you cannot do that. Like that is, you have so much more spade work to go between it's generally reliable to therefore we can trust that it's what it says about the resurrection. Like
if you read Homer's Iliad, the Odyssey, or Virgil, okay, you're going to read geography, you're going to find places, you're going to find probable events. Trojan War probably happened, some form of it. It's been heavily legendary or mythologized, right? I think the same of the Gospels. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck. And I think what happened for me as I was deconverting, and I can't even remember the chronology. I talk about this stuff so much, so it's difficult to know when was I thinking this or that. But I'm with you. Like when I started seeing that they're going out of their way, they're not making mistakes, I would say, on writing their narrative of the passion or whatnot differently. They're purposefully being creative and intentionally writing a fanciful tale their own way, sometimes adjusting or correcting the earlier gospel, in my opinion. But
especially Luke,
I would definitely say that Matthew and Luke are correcting Mark in many ways, or adding to and wanting to do something special. I don't think it's intentionally or a mistake necessarily. Yeah. Sometimes I do think there are mistakes, but these are all like my guess is at the end of the day, though, they have the liberty to create narrative, to create their own version of what Jesus's death was like, or how the resurrection happened, who showed up, who's wanting to do what at the resurrection, what Jesus did, how many days did he stay on earth, the whole nine, right? Like he decides to ascend in Acts chapter 1, but this is after 40 days. But in Luke, at the end of Luke, which is supposed to be the same author, he doesn't stick around for 40 days. He already goes. So there's so many discrepancies that you have to at least be honest and say, look, I don't know if this is historically reliable material, which made me open other doors and investigate things further. So I love the way you're describing this. It's kind of interesting how far you've gone into investigating these discrepancies. Were you still a Christian when you found this stuff out?
Yeah, I was still a Christian. I mean, I was still a committed Christian. So, going back to what I said, I mean, I was still a committed Christian until I finally basically said, I'm not committed. I'm not committed anymore. I'm out. Like my deconversion announcement. I was still a faithful Christian until that point. I had lost my beliefs about 6 or 7 months before that. They had been eroding for about a year and a half before that. A year and a half before I lost them, and then I remained faithful for like another 6 or 7 months. Really trying to do the Pascalian thing. And so, these were all things that I was reading and investigating and thinking about like as a Christian. So a lot of times people are like, oh, like, you're an atheist now. And I'm like, no, these were a lot of things that like, that I was thinking about when I was a Christian.
Right.
And this comes up a lot, like when we're talking about like objections from morality. And I've started to see this a lot too, is like when we talk about, I've been posting a lot of moral issues that I'm finding. And they're like, oh, well, how do you ground morality and all that kind of stuff? And I'm like, I still, slightly have the precept impulse. I get it. I understand it. I'm still a classical theist. I still think God grounds those things. But I started realizing like a Christian, I started asking these questions when I was a Christian. I started saying, hey, I'm starting to see these things. how does this make sense? How do we reconcile this? How do we reconcile this with the God of love? I was asking it as a Christian. The answer, well, how do you ground it, wouldn't work with me. I would say, well, you ground it in God. Like, that's how you ground it. So, but right. Can we still ask these questions? Those answers just, that may be a good, tactic when you're dealing with an atheist. And I did that, previously, but it doesn't actually answer the challenge, because all you have to do is swap out the objector from a Matt Dillahunty to, a me when I was still a Christian asking those questions. And now now you still have to answer the question.
So morality is a definite rabbit hole that can get lost. And of course, everyone has arguments for or against, or whatever their position is. I want to get into this Pascalian thing real quick. Please bear with me. If you super chat, I will get to those shortly. I really want to cover a few things with Tyler that I think are relevant. So Pascalian, and then I want to deal with the problem of evil in your estimation pertaining to the biblical text. So, and how that relates to your adjustment to classical theism. So Pascalian, correct me. I'm throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. You're like, what if I'm wrong? It's better to just believe in case, right? Like, look at what they say this loving God is going to do to me for all eternity if I'm wrong about this thing. Yeah. So you're holding on to whatever you can. Tell me, I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing. Tell me your Pascalian issues.
Yeah, so I was never, and maybe this was the problem, I was never afraid of hell. So, and some Christians have been like, well, I mean, that could be like why, and maybe because I was never afraid of it, like maybe that would have kept me in line. But for me, the Pascalian thing was more of like, it was more of like in a relationship where it's like, look, like I'm not feeling anymore. I'm not all that kind of stuff, but like, I'm going to stay committed and go, I'm going to commit to therapy, and I'm going to commit to doing all the things that I can do to possibly salvage this, even though, because I think there, at the time I was like, I could be wrong. I could be having a dark, they talk about dark nights of the souls all the time for millennium Christianity, right? For years, it could be a dark night of the soul. And then people have, rapturous experiences afterwards, and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, it could be one of those things. I'm going to stay faithful, committed. I'm going to try to live out these promises, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a certain point where I was just like I started thinking about it, and this will come up when we talk about the problem of evil. I started thinking about it like in context of, I'm a father to my kids, Heavenly Father to his children. And I started thinking about that, how do you, even if you're sinful, know to give good things to your children? And I started thinking about it in the context of like love and comfort for my kids. Right? Because sometimes I might do things that my kids don't like and are uncomfortable for them, but it's for their benefit. It's for their good. But I started thinking about like, if my kids were literally telling me like, we don't think you love us. We think we don't know you. We don't know you're around. We don't think you love it. We don't feel safe here. We don't feel comfort, all that kind of stuff. If I was a loving father, that would break my heart, and I would do everything I could, maybe not to, I don't want to maybe spoil them and then give them a Mercedes, but I'm going to make sure that they know that I love them.
Right. I so relate to you, Tyler, right now. This was my issue as well. I had a problem. I read Romans 9, and Paul's hypothetical debate partner, when he says, after he explains, before any of them had done either good or bad, I hate and I love. And then he explains, for the purpose of election. This is why systematically I'm with you, at least Pauline. If we take Paul and his perception and make that the whole systematic view of the Bible, yes, I think that we're dealing with a kind of what we call Reformed or Calvinistic type of thinking.
He's a predestinarian. He's a determinist of some kind. Yeah.
He's some kind of, and I don't know all the nuts and bolts, but at the end of the day, he's like, well, how can God find fault? And he pretty much, his answer is, shut up. You mortal clay. God, the maker, can do whatever he wants. He's justified to do it. And I now imagine in that world, it kind of makes me wonder, like, how are parents at this time? Like, and you're calling them Heavenly Father. So like you're describing here, I'm a father of 3 sons. I've been married over half my life almost. I mean, like for a long time, 16 years. And I'm sitting here thinking, I love people that may be reprobates. We love to throw that term around in the Calvinist circles. And does that mean that I love people more than God loves some people? which was an issue for me. I was a 5-pointer and beyond, not the 4-pointer universalist. God's struggling with his two wills.
Right.
I thought that was schizophrenic, or at least two personalities. Like God had a disorder. His prescriptive will, which is what's known, a thou shalt not.
Yeah.
But really what happens is what he really wants.
Yeah.
So I did not know how to reconcile this issue. And I thought Calvinists were crazy trying to do both, because to me, it was like his will is what happens and what gets done. Yeah. He tells you things, but he purposely works you against, he causes you to do things against this prescriptive if he hardens your heart, which I saw that as a proactive thing, not he negates his spirit and therefore you start to fall into sin. God actively hardened people's hearts. I stopped beating around the bush and called the Bible for what it says.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm getting excited, but you see,
you're exactly right. And I make, this is why when I did I did part 1 of my deconversion announcement, I said, well, look, because people are like, oh, well, you could just become another type of Christian. And I'm like, I mean, the only other type of Christian I think I could become is maybe a progressive. But then at that point, I don't know why I even care about the Bible anymore, because it's just a wax nose for progressives at that point. Like, if I want to take the Bible seriously, right, I think that Reformed theology and Calvinism is the one that does it. Is the most consistent with what the text actually says. Because what happens is, you get all these, and this is where I when I was a Calvinist and I was debating non-Calvinists, right? I did a lot of those types of debates. But they would, the free will theodicy and well, God allows evil, but he doesn't cause evil. And I'm like, I mean, that's garbage. That's BS. Like, here are like all these passages in the Bible where God, whatever you want to make of it, however you want to try to gymnastic out of it, like God takes causal credit for it. Yep. Whatever you think the metaphysics of how he does it or allows it or whatever, he is taking credit for the outcome. And the outcome is someone sinning, someone being deluded, someone having a false belief, someone being whatever it is. So I have tons of examples of them. And I would use this as a Calvinist, and I would say when debating non-Calvinists, they're like, oh, well, God just allows the free will decision, blah, 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 blah. All right. And I'd be like, okay, well, like, first of all, you have biblical texts that directly contradict that, because he takes causal credit for it. It's by his hand that Pilate and the Jews and Herod crucified Jesus. Right. It literally says by his hand. It's by his proorizo, by his foreordination, by his hand. In the next verse, his hand is the thing that heals. His hand is always causally active in any scripture passage that it's used in. Right. He deludes people in second Thessalonians. He hardens. But
he's not the author of confusion, Tyler. And then you got him confusing people in the Tower of Babel. I mean, you can go anywhere. And in Second Thessalonians 2, where it says that he sends a deluding spirits, you follow the causal chain. It's so that they'll believe what's false. Why? So that he can judge them. Right. So he literally says that God intentionally deludes them so that he can judge them. Now, again, Calvinists will bite that bullet. They'll go hardline. It's fine. It takes the text seriously. Right. So I look at these other views, the open theist views and other ones, and I'm like, if I'm going to take the Bible seriously, that's just not an option. That's just not a live option for me. And mind you, when you're saying this, for the people who are just tuning in, when he says take the Bible seriously, this is if we're systematically trying to rectify and make it a unity, meaning the whole biblical corpus, then overall that position makes most sense. Tyler's not saying that there aren't arguments that contradict the view that we're describing here, because you can find God not knowing the future. You can find God kind of mistakenly not understanding things like that. This is also one of the reasons we no longer, I would say, hold to this systematic view. But if you are factoring that systematic view in mind, and that's what Christians who are harmonizers, inerrantists, infallibility, or at least some model in which scripture is God breathed, however you want to define this, that, they're coming up ways trying to fit these contradictions and fix the discrepancies between gospels or God's personal character or what he's doing. Does he know the future? Does he predestine it? Is it some middle view? Is it free will all the way, open theistic? Anyway, I just wanted to grant that. So we did Pascalian. We definitely have been tackling this whole God's view of love. Did you want to piggyback anything else into that Pascalian thing about how you as a parent loved your kids? And
so one more. So the other thing that happened in kind of that, like, in responding to non-Calvinists and saying, well, no, God actually takes causal credit for evil. But I also said, okay, let's imagine your view is right. Let's imagine that it is allowing all that kind of stuff. And I remember this was something that also turned the tide, is an argument that I used against non-Calvinists. And I said, look, think of the book of Job, right? And imagine for a second that it's not God, right? Imagine that I moved into a neighborhood and I knew that there was a psychopathic, sociopathic serial killer next to me. And I went to him, I'm like, hey, have you considered my favorite son? Right? And he's like, yeah, but you protect him. And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to leave town so you can do whatever you want to him. You can kill all of his friends. Because remember, like, Satan didn't just kill Job's family. It was all his friends. They were there. It took out everything by natural causes, right? Took out his friends, killed everyone, killed the whole family, took his wealth, killed his day laborers, everybody. And then round 2, he's like, oh yeah, he still hasn't cursed you. And God's like, okay, well, like, you can do more if you want to, just don't kill him. So now he gave him like boils and all that kind of stuff. And like, imagine that I did that with the serial killer. And I was like, you can do that with Mike. You can kill all of his friends. You can kill the rest of my family. You can do all that kind of stuff. You can burn down the house. You can destroy. You can do all that kind of stuff. You can give him leukemia. You can give him You can make him as sick as you can. You just can't kill him. And it's okay because at the end of the day, I'm going to give him. I'm going to give my son back like more friends than he had to begin with. So like, let's ignore all the ones who died. I'm going to give him more.
Right.
Right. Like, how many of you would call me good?
Yeah. So
or loving, right?
If you had 5 children, now God kills them all, and you had 6 friends, kills them all. Your wife says, curse God and die. Later on, or somehow you end up with 10 children, double what you had to begin with, but those 5 are dead. You have 12 friends. You first had 6 best friends. Now you have 12 now later down the road. Like, good God.
Yeah. Like that makes, and here, because there's the creator creature distinction, which you can say, okay, well, God doesn't have to be moral like we have. And even if I grant that though, right. This is the argument that I've been making recently is even if I grant that, right, we're told that God is love. Whatever love is, God is. And we're told that the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. We are to be loving as God is loving. We're to be holy as he is holy. So there's a sense where it's like, okay, the question isn't if it's moral or immoral, right? I'll put that to the side, right? Maybe God has the right to do things that would be immoral for us to do, be moral for him to do, whatever. I don't think God's a moral agent. He's not a moral subject, but whatever. But the question is that love? Right? Because whatever that means, whatever love means, that's what God is. And so if we look at that and we'd say, okay, not only is it right or wrong or whatever, but is that love to my child? Mm-hmm. No, that's not love. And so what you're saying then is it would be unloving. It would be, if I did that, it would be contrary to the nature of God because it would be unloving and God is love.
Right.
But if God does it, then it's okay. But that means God is doing unloving things. He's being not God.
You have to redefine what love even means for God at that point, and then we almost have no way of being able to relate, to understand how that could be loving. I would look at you if you did that to someone and say, you're horrible. Yeah. Like, I don't care that you paid him back double. You're horrible. Like, this is not love.
It's horrible. I mean? And if they try to say, oh, well, God's love isn't like our love, then I'm going to say, okay, well, I understand, there's analogical language about God. I get it. I totally get it. But there has to be some touch point where there's similar concepts, right? And if God can do something so unloving, but it can be love for God, I just don't even know what that touch point is anymore.
That's exactly
it just becomes like I can understand the whole, like, it seems like God doesn't know something Old Testament, and that's anthropomorphic language. I can get on board with that. I can totally get it. Mm-hmm. I used to argue that I buy, but if this is like something like X can be not X, then it's not analogy anymore. Like it's not anthropomorphic language anymore. I understand that saying God is Father is anthropomorphic language because it's not like he birthed us, but there's conceptual overlap between those two things, right? That makes the analogy work. If unloving can be loving, there's no conceptual overlap. I don't even know what the analogy means anymore.
Well, what they meant for evil, Tyler, God meant for good.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I've asked him, okay, let's go to the Job example. What if I told you that I knew that doing that to my child meant that somebody else, some random person elsewhere would become a saint, or there'd be soul building for me, or there would be, I'm protecting free free will in the abstract, which by the way is a terrible theodicy anyways. But like I'm pretty, like, how would that justify what I just did for my, like, would that somehow make that not an unloving thing anymore? No, like those are terrible justifications for anything like that. So yeah.
So we're tapping in. It's not only that we're dealing with this Pascalian issue, it's also a problem of evil that we've been also touching on, I would say. And that, what you heard my view is, I heard this and I thought in my mind, it was just a little chink in the armor. It wasn't like this is what made me not a Christian. It was something that I had to, big pill that you have to swallow. And that was, do I love people more than God? Because it's clear, if God is doing all this stuff, there's some vessels for glory and some vessels for, destruction. And that's all on God. So, who are you, oh man, to say to the maker, why have you made me thus? It's so clear that the language is saying this. So I had this problem as well, trying to figure out what's the point? Is all this just almost meaningless on this level, but to God, something else is going on. And all this experience to us is just really nothing. Yeah. That was hard for me to grapple with, and within Christianity. And by the way, everything you said was while you were a Christian. Yeah. Not saying we can go back to the memory of it and argue the point and still use it today. It's just, I have come out of that box, and I suspect you have too now. And we're making totally different arguments from historical linguistics and discrepancies and other things that would make us say, this is a man-made document. Christians go, of course, men wrote it, but God's behind this. We're saying it doesn't look like God's behind this. And I should be clear. One of the answers that I love getting now is you don't understand the argument, right? You don't understand the moral argument, whatever it is. And I'm like, really? Because like 7 months ago, when I would present the moral argument, I've had like literally the same people who used to like share my stuff and be like, this guy's a great apologist. Like he's, I had people like, saying like they love the way that I talk about it, and I finally get it, and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, literally 6 months ago, you said you knew that I understood it and you shared that I understood it. Now suddenly I don't miraculously, I like miraculously completely forgot and don't think about things anymore, or like, all that kind of stuff. And it's, I can hear some of like the response videos coming and be like, oh, well, like he doesn't understand the Bible. And I'm like, okay, like, of course, did I not understand it this entire time? Now, I will say it's not an argument from authority. I've met lots of people who are like, they were ex-Christians. I don't think they can accurately describe Christianity to like save their life, right? That just because you used to be X doesn't mean that you understand X well, or ever understood it well, or are describing it well. Like I'm not trying to say because I used to do this, therefore you should believe that I'm perfectly accurate, representing it. But like, nothing has changed in how I understand it. And so, for the people who are like, oh, before they always thought that I understood it. Or people are gonna be like, oh, well, you don't understand Calvinism. I'm like, the ordaining committees in the PCA, and when I had to teach the Westminster Confessions and teach series on Calvinism and go through it, Reformed theology, they all thought that I understood it fine. So, the people who asked me to debate it, and who presented my debates as like, one of the more robust Calvinists out there, they had no problem, saying that I understood it. So, maybe I misunderstood it, but then a lot of people who claim it misunderstand it also. So I got one more question before we get to any super chats here. I took this picture and made that the thumbnail, right? Yeah. Seems like there's like a apologetic empire here. How have you had any run-ins or had any discussions with any of the people you see on the image since leaving?
Not really since leaving. That was at an ETS conference a few years back, probably 3 or 4 years ago. So we all got together. We went to In and Out late one night after a bunch of days at a bunch of talks and everything like that. So haven't really talked with most of them after the fact. A few of them have like checked in and said, "Hey, we love you. If you need anything, let us know." Mm-hmm. I got a couple of invites to be on a couple of different shows, but they've largely gone dark. But yeah, so I mean, I still love all those guys. They're great guys, and that actually almost everyone in that picture I think are brilliant. I think they're doing good good thoughts. They're not that group is not like the Ken Hams of Christianity. So yeah.
I would argue maybe a couple of these guys can do some tweaking in what they say, but nonetheless,
Everyone can, yeah.
what do you do? What do you do? Camille's back. Thank you, Camille, for the super chat. What's your current view on 1, all human decisions were decreed by God. 2, everything ultimately happens because of God's glory, even e.g. the Holocaust. 3, human prayer causes God to do other than what he would do otherwise.
So, okay.
Your current view, of course.
Current view. I don't think decreed by God, although, I am a determinist. So I'm still a compatibilist, right? So I still think that all human decisions are determined, and yet we are still substantially free. I just don't think it's the result necessarily of a decree. Everything ultimately happens for God's glory. No, I don't think so. And human prayer causes God to do other than what he would do otherwise. I never thought that in the first place. So, in Reformed theology, human prayer doesn't cause God to do other than he would. It gets complicated.
Yeah,
but that was never my view. So it still isn't my view.
You would almost ask a prayer, but if it be thy will, God.
Yeah.
You're almost
the view was its means. The prayer was the means that God ordained to have the ends come about. So it's not that you could actually change God's mind with your prayer, because God's omniscient. I don't even know what that, and I still don't even know what that means to say that an omniscient being can change their mind or change what they're going to do, because if they're omniscient, they know what they're going to do. You can't change what they're going to do. Otherwise, it's possible for them to be wrong in their prior knowledge, which it just gets incoherent. So prayer in Reformed theology has very much a means understanding, not an effective understanding.
Thank you, Camille. Appreciate that super chat, my friend. Seriously, MNAG. I just say MNAG. Once you start on the road to deconstruct, you really need to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Eventually, you will see the light.
Maybe it is a very surreal experience sometimes where you're like, oh, like I still have things that I'm like, you don't realize where you believe something before, and then now I'm like 6 months later, I'm like, oh, like something rubs up against it. Now I'm like, oh, now I have to like take that thing and like relook at it and see it. Like, so it's definitely an interesting experience.
I in this super chat just want to ask you, have you, like you mentioned this earlier, but just to emphasize again for those who are tuning in, have you felt a sense of freedom in a way that you didn't before? Like there's almost a burden lifted off your shoulders in a way?
Maybe like an intellectual burden. I love having my Sundays back, which is great. That's, I don't know if that's a freedom thing, but I don't know if it's a freedom feeling. Like
as a Reformed guy, let me emphasize something here. You're a wretch. Okay. Yeah. Your righteousness is filthy rags. Like you're almost just nothing. That mindset really stuck with me. And in fact, I have a brother who went to the same church under Andy Webb who will write me stuff. I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of anything. And like, this is his mentality. That's the kind of mentality I had. Have you like let all that baggage go?
So I never had that view. So there is in Reformed theology, there's a distinction. So it might've been because you came from a very, very fundamentalist kind of version of it. Mm-hmm. But historically in Reformed theology, the wretched was vertical, right? So, and this gets confused a lot. This in a lot of fundamentalist circles, the wretched is you are a terrible person. You're bad. You are wretched. You are filthy. You're awful. Like it can like eliminate your self-worth as a human being. In the Reformed tradition, there's actually a long where you are a wretch in regard to God. Vertically, you're a wretch. It doesn't mean that you have zero value horizontally to other people.
Yeah, I didn't know how to compartmentalize those because when I read Paul and was just like, oh, wretched man that I am, and he bragged to those on the horizontal plane about how wretched he was, I just saw my self-worth as nothing. It is Christ in me. Nothing. I am nothing, but Christ in me is something. So I really took that literal. Yeah. And maybe it was meant literal. I don't know, because the way they were willing to, or seemingly getting persecuted and willing to go and almost in an insane way of going to the cross, right? Take up your cross and follow me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
Maybe
if you think about the gospel, like even in Reformed theology, you think about the gospel, like if everyone was a wretch such that they were devalued as their being, then a lot of the other statements wouldn't make sense, right? That you're to love your neighbor as yourself, that you are right, because there's a certain sense that you can only, if you think of yourself as the worst type of person, you love your neighbor as yourself, that you love your neighbor as the worst type of person. There's a certain sense where you are to, it doesn't mean that you have no self-worth, no self-esteem, that you are just intrinsically a wretched person that you should just like curl up and die. Right.
Right.
And it would actually, if that was the case and you kind of universalize that and you said, okay, well, sin just makes people wretched people, terrible people, no value people, then a lot of the other statements about like, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, like all that kind of stuff, like where it collapses all those categories into, we are all, children of God, we are all image bearers. There's value in those types of things. You couldn't have that if that wretchedness is universalized, right? So that is a trend in very like fundamentalist Reform circles, but there is in Reformed theology there is this theme of that's a vertical thing, and so you are wretched with regard to God. You can tear your clothes and cry and beg out and scream out and think you are wretched in the sense that you have no righteousness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you like have no self-worth. So I didn't have that feeling, during it. So I don't really have to work it out coming out of it.
Yeah. And like, you should hate this life in order to gain life. But if you love this life, you will lose life. Like those kind of things, man, those are pretty smack in the face type stuff.
And those were value statements, right? Those are saying, if you love this life so much that you're going to hold on to it and you're going to forsake the things of God, then yes, you don't love this life. You don't all that kind of stuff. Right. But it's not defeatist. It's not, why polish the brass on the Titanic, right? So you're still, that's why you still have true religion is to care for orphans and widows, right? You still have that idea of there's still beauty.
I kind of wonder, and I don't know where to interpret this, but I kind of wonder if leaping to James to try and understand what true religion is, especially since he actually conflicts with Paul's own letters. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, this is the thing where I'm at now. I don't pretend there's a systematic way of knowing what the meaning of that is without like, it's really an interpretation type thing. And it's like, I don't know what to make of some of this at this point.
Well, you have to remember right now, neither of us think that the gospel is true. Right. So here I'm re-inhabiting like the Christian, this is how I would answer and say, like, you could consistently, hold these types of things and have that vertical and horizontal distinction, because this is if this is one unified message, then you have these examples that justify that distinction. That's what
this is really interesting. I never really thought of it in those terms, but I'm reading Paul. Paul doesn't want people to get married. This is a horizontal thing because he expects the vertical to take place at some point. Yeah. The coming down of the Lord, the parousia, the whole nine. And that did not happen. So anyway, Chris H., thank you for the super chat. What is Tyler's new path looking forward? Will he now move towards social justice and defending those harmed by Christianity, like LGBTQ people?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. LGBTQ is an interesting thing. I don't know if you had this experience. Well, let me actually caveat this. I'm not going to say I was like an LGBTQ advocate or anything like that before when I was Christian, but you can actually look through some of the back catalog. And I hated the way that the church treated the LGBTQ community. Right. Even though I thought that it was sinful, right? Because I would always be like, okay, but we think adultery is sinful. But like, if someone caught in adultery, like goes through cancer and they have children, we still organize meal trains for them. We still care for them. We still visit them. We don't ostracize them. We don't, all that kind of stuff. Like, if we still welcome them into church, right? You do all this kind of, like, I could never grasp why the church treated LGBTQ as if it was like this special thing to be
like a beyond sin.
Like I could never. So like, and this sounds cliche, and I know like the backlash to this type of comment, but like I always had LGBTQ friends, and even when I was like, hey, like I disagree, I still think like the activity is sinful. I never thought the orientation was sinful. I never anything like that. But so like that never drives. So I was never fully there. But what happens, weirdly enough, is that, not weirdly, I mean, it makes sense. When you leave, the justification, obviously, for even thinking it's sinful, you're like, oh, well, that was dumb. I don't really have any. I mean, maybe if I know there are like some atheists that are against it for like trying to claim it's like unnatural, whatever. But I just I don't find that convincing. And then any support that I had for thinking that it was sinful is gone, because I don't think sinful is a thing anymore. Right. So, I don't know if I'll move towards like social justice activity. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Thank you for that answer, Chris. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you. Nutty Squirrel, great discussion. I hope that was the next one here. Yes, great discussion. Look, we've got 485 people, and I need to let everybody know this is a popping stream right now. Go subscribe to Tyler's YouTube. We'll refresh this at the end, and we're going to see the count. Let's hope we can get Tyler some more people to check him out. You can agree, disagree, whatever. Take him to task in his comment section, but it's all about having that discussion like we're having today. So I really appreciate that, Nutty Squirrel.
Thank you.
Always appreciate the support. Henry Marr says the God hiddenness problem is the worst. We really haven't talked about that much, but there's like a spider web within all these this thought about like, if God loves, like we're talking about, God is love. Is it like, I'm trying to even defend the idea of like how this is even possible. As someone who struggled, and I always go back to addiction because I'm a recovering drug addict, 7 years off of heroin.
Good job. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I was literally at death's door. And sometimes tough love is a way to help the addict, especially when they're sabotaging their own life because they have an illness. There's a real issue here. I would call it a disease under the specific definition that it's called. And I'm sitting here thinking like, how is God's hiddenness even helpful in trying to help us when we have sincere doubts and questions about this issue? You can almost see why Christians sometimes, not all, will say stuff like, you have a secret sin, or you just want to keep sinning. They want to find other excuses for why you've left, Tyler. But divine hiddenness, hit that one real quick with us.
Yeah. Divine hiddenness is basically I mean, there's lots of them. There's lots of different versions of it, but the one that I had is basically I run it as an internal critique of Christianity, right? And so if the promises of Christianity are true and the statements of God are true, and I didn't even do it as a universal hiddenness, like to all of creation, which I could do, right? I don't find the answers to it be like, oh, well, it would violate free will. Garbage. That's a garbage answer. It's just not. It is not. That is not a good answer. But I was like, as a Christian, like Christians shouldn't experience hiddenness to the point of deconversion, right? If Christianity is true, if the promises are true, if what is said about God being Father are true, right? If all those things are true, if that's the background information, we shouldn't expect hiddenness for that class of people, right? And yet that's exactly what a lot of, I've talked to a lot of people who deconverted recently, obviously, that experience of hiddenness. And I've talked to a lot of people like with me, like, I mean, I wasn't like, I wasn't drinking. I wasn't out having sex. I wasn't like, had nothing. I was like begging and pleading and going to church and doing like all that kind of stuff. Like hiddenness should not, if that's background, we shouldn't expect that. And so the fact that we expect that creates a hiddenness problem.
I know that reformers during the Protestant Reformation were big when they criticized the Catholic miracle claims. They finally eventually scalpeled their own Bibles, right? Because the claims they used against the Catholics kind of worked inward on their own scripture. But in that process, they came up with a solution for this problem where why is not God doing the miraculous? Since they definitely were using this against the Catholic Church. And so you find this argument, cessationism. So he that which is perfect, when that which is perfect has come in, the canon of scripture, we notice the interpretation there. God's not doing these things in front of people or to show himself anymore. He's hidden. He doesn't need to. You have all you need. The fundamentalist, evangelical, presuppositionalist, or whatever might say that argument. My point is did you ever just I want your honest opinion. You ever read the Bible and go, just do this for me this once. Like, just please, anything, like a doubting Thomas kind of.
So yes and no, right? Because there is a sense where under sola scriptura, right? So you have, the Bible is sufficient revelation for life and godliness, right? That's the saying, right? So and again, I still conceptually understand it, right? This is why I said earlier when they're like, oh, like you weren't a true Christian, like I understand, like I don't take offense because I understand within their system,
right?
That's what makes sense.
Yeah,
cool. I get it. You're working within your system. If your system is true, then yes, that's probably true, right? Same with sola scriptura. Like I get where it's like it's age of miracles. God was working at these times where he was validating the message, he was validating the gospel, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Cool. Totally get it. There was a certain point though where I was like, look, again, like I'm not asking for a pillar of smoke and a pillar of fire, right?
I was, by the way, anything,
no, like it could be still small voice. Like I don't care. I don't care.
It's hard for me to know if it was me though versus anyway.
But I wouldn't care. And I think that like I was like anything that I could attach that significance to, totally fine with it. Like even again, like I said earlier, even if I could never justify it to anybody else, like bring me back in. Whatever it is. But there was also, I started just being really dissatisfied with that answer. And I talked about it in my last video, the deconversion part 2, which it doesn't show up on the videos. It shows up under the live tab. But there was a moment where I was like, okay, but why not? Because there's a sense where like, oh, well, you can't ask for miracles because then you're making God your cosmic butler. And I'm like, okay, but the core claim of Christianity is a miracle claim, right? So which one is it? Is it miracle? A miracle is the most sufficient thing to drive belief. Then why not more miracles? Or is it miracles aren't sufficient for belief? You just have to have faith. Then why is a miracle the core claim of Christianity?
Well put.
And then that just spiraled, right? So one of the examples I gave in that video is, okay, like imagine how many people, I'm sure if people just gave thumbs up in your comments, we'd see 1,000 thumbs up, or I guess you only have 400.
Type 1 if you're thumbs up in right now.
Type 1 if you're thumb up, right? You left because, at least in part, maybe not maybe, but at least in part, the church was corrupt, evil, abusive, covered for abusers, stole money, something along those types of lines, right? That was at least a part in why you left, right? So the example that I get in Acts, when Ananias and Sapphira, they don't even steal from the church, right? They sell a field, they give half to it, and they say they gave a whole, right? They gave a 50% tithe. All they did, I mean, did they do something wrong? Sure. They wanted to look more generous than they did. Fine. Whatever. Was that wrong? Yeah. Were they stealing? No. Were they embezzling? No. Were they stealing from the poor? No. All that kind of stuff. What happened? God kills them both at the rebuke of Peter. Separate times, but kills them both at the rebuke of Peter. Right. And the answer that's given is, well, that's to that church needed establishing, right? It shows that God would protect the sanctity and purity of his church, right? And I'm like, okay, imagine, maybe not even to death, maybe every single time someone stole or embezzled money from the church, stole from the poor, whatever it is, abused, covered for pedophiles, whatever, anything that didn't protect the purity of the church, God would give them boils, right? All of those ones would go away. Right? Every single one of those ones would go away because it'd be like, oh, like, and I have to imagine, like for me, I probably never would have left Christianity.
Right. I'm with you.
I'd be like, it's so clear that like God is protecting this thing.
Right.
So the amount of, and I got to imagine more people.
And then imagine comparing it to other religions, right? And they don't have claims that come to pass or something. And you're like, well, this is clearly evidence to show.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where it's like, so that's not me asking God to be a cosmic butler. That's not me asking for some personal miracle. That's not anything. That's just straight divine hiddenness in ways that we not only shouldn't expect, but we don't see in the New Testament anyways. And it's hard to say that it's cessationism, because cessationism has to do with like personal works of miracles and healings and all that kind of stuff, which would also be, I don't know why people wouldn't believe if every time someone prayed over them in the name of Jesus, there was healing. Mm-hmm. How would that violate free will or prevent soul making or sainthood? That would make a buttload of saints. People would freely believe because there's miracles. So, and that's the other thing is I don't understand how seeing a miracle violates free will. Like, it imposes too much. It forces you to believe. Like, what does that mean that the resurrection violated the free will of the apostles? Like, I don't understand the argument. So like that type of hiddenness in ways that we wouldn't expect hiddenness, or where the hiddenness seems to cause more detriment to the very things that God says he values, right? That's the conflict for me, right? That's the thing where it's like the Christian promise, like it's not just in violation with what we observe in reality, it's in tension with its own biblical Christian promises.
Right.
That's where the tension is. And
I think, come back to the same words. I got, I don't know if you know the Christian YouTuber Ruslan. I might be making a trip down to California sometime, probably in May, to have a conversation with this guy on his actual platform. But I bring up honesty a lot. And I think if you're being honest with this material, this is a valid criticism. These are valid issues. So anybody, whether you're a Christian or not, at the end of the day, hearing what you're saying, Tyler, should walk away going, I get it. This makes sense. I get it. So,
or at least understand why people might walk away, why people might say, oh, well, this is a problem. And again, a lot, I can almost see some of the videos coming out and they're gonna be like, oh, well, that one thing, well, that's not a reason to leave Christianity, because does that mean the resurrection didn't happen? Oh. And I want to point out, like, I'm not saying that I'm almost a cumulative casist. I'm not saying this one thing is the death knell to Christianity, or it's the silver bullet, or whatever analogy you want to use. There are hundreds of these things, hundreds of biblical problems. Like they just started mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting to the point where I'm like, well, that's just a big pile now. I don't know what to do with that.
I'm with you. Wayne Wright, thank you for that 20. I really appreciate it. What does Tyler think about the Bible's silence on the Trinity and the church's undying devotion to it?
I'm not sure that the Bible is silent on the Trinity. I still think that there is. I think that okay, let me put it this way. Whether or not you think it's coherent is a different question. But I think as the theology of the Bible developed, it very clear, and again, whether or not you think this is original to, if it did develop later, or it's original to the original author, or the intention of Genesis, or whatever it is, I think there is this very clear concept that develops, even in the Old Testament, that God is somehow either multi-personal, or that there's I don't want to say polytheism, because I don't think that that's the case. They started, I think there was a tension in the Old Testament of like, God is more than just one person. I don't think they had the categories to talk about it. Some that might be, you might read that and cash it out as like, well, they viewed the divine council, and there's these multiple beings, but there's this tension, and it's ambiguous and unclear. I think by the time you get to the New Testament, and you see it starting to develop, there is a very real sense. I think by then the Holy Spirit is a person. So I think by then the Hellenistic Jews would have almost been a bipersonal at some point. And the way that the New Testament authors, even very early in the Gospels, take Old Testament passages. There's Richard B. Hayes has some things, the echoes of scriptures in the Gospels, the echoes of scriptures in letters of Paul. The ways that it takes these descriptions of Yahweh and applies them to Jesus, they do seem to think that Jesus is this unique either person. By the time you get to John, I think that it's just completely there. But you have this, that Jesus is the special person of God, but in a way that it's that you could say something true of God that is true of Jesus. And so that I think they're working that out. So I think you can get Trinitarianism. By the time you get to the later epistles, I think it's pretty developed. Not as developed as you get with homoousios and that whole thing. By the time you get to the councils, they develop the theology and the philosophy of it way there. But I think by the time you get to the end of the New Testament, you do have a view of three persons as in one being.
So I'd take Bart Ehrman's approach on this, and other critical scholars like James F. McGrath. I actually interviewed him and asked him.
Yeah.
It's worth showing you this to give you a laugh, actually. James F. McGrath, he actually is quite a character. But I don't think the New Testament teaches Trinitarianism. I do think, however, that the development using New Testament ideas, because I think Jesus is the image, he's the image bearer of God, which you could see easily conflating that he is God, but he's always praying to God. So you kind of wonder, and I know the Trinitarians will have to find a way to make this make sense, but I got to play the intro so that everybody watching this can at least have a quick little chuckle, put some energy into this thing here. But it fits this issue. Jesus and God, and this is his little statement. We might as well get a laugh while we're here together. Here we go. Does the New Testament teach Trinitarianism?
No.
No. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Nice.
Anyway,
to those
I'm
who are
sure that
triggered
there's
easily.
I had to give a warning for triggering people there, but it so I can see how later we talk about systematic canonization and whatnot. I could see how they're trying to work out, but they definitely see him as a son of God. They see him divine. He has an apotheosis even early in Paul, so he is divine in their eyes. But how that fits within the matrix, I think they fix those nuts and bolts later.
Yeah.
And so that's my take.
I think it'd be similar. I'd say a similar thing where it's probably anachronistic to say the New Testament is Trinitarian,
right?
But it has the building blocks of the Trinitarian theology, right? So I would say like it's anachronistic to say Paul was a Calvinist, right? That's entirely too anachronistic. But the theology that, or even to say Paul was Augustinian, right? That's just not the right categories to use. But everything that is Augustinian or Calvinistic was in Paul.
I won't say everything, but predestinarian stuff. I'm with you. There's something
everything that makes it distinctly that, that in that predestinarian determination, election, all those types of things. It is present there. It's just not.
I'm with you. Right? Yeah. I just would take even the Romans 9 thing, Romans 9-11. And I want to get to the next super chat, but I think that we as Calvinists, as when we were, we universalize this message and not realize that this is like a Jew. There's a Jewish context here that we're kind of like, oh, it's all for everybody. And I get it. The framework's there, but I don't know if that's the message here in Romans 9-11. He's trying to create a category to graft Gentiles in when this wasn't meant for them. This was for the Jews. And so there's all sorts of stuff.
Well, actually, I had a debate on this with, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name. John Cranman. Because he takes a corporate election view. That kind of it's a Jewish thing. It's all that kind of stuff. I actually don't think that's the way to read Romans 9.
Interesting.
For several reasons, exegetically, and I still think exegetically that's not the way. I think Paul actually was making universalizing principles. I think he was applying it in certain contexts, but I think he was actually making universal principles.
So I look at it as Paul's a last days apocalyptic Jew who thinks that Jesus is coming back any minute, and the goal he has is the only way he's coming back is to gather the nations in. So in his mind, he has to find a way to bring the nations in order to have the second coming take place. And of course, when the more he keeps going to the nations, trying to get to Spain, it doesn't happen. So, we probably have some overlap on how we read Romans 9-11, but I don't read it the same way I read it before. But there's that passage about election and who are you, oh man? That hasn't changed. I mean, that is pretty blunt. God's a hardcore dictator in that. Yeah. Zictomorph, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for going through this in real time and under the microscope. It does help a lot of us going through similar spots. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I've said this before, I'm not trying to deconvert anyone. I have people that are Christians and they've reached out and hey, I'm going through the same thing. I don't want to leave. Who should I read? I'm here's if you just want to read the best Christian answers, here, go read this scholar, go read this. If you want to salvage your faith, go read this, if someone's hey, I'm pretty sure I'm deconverting. Like, they want to read, quick, go read that one. Like, I want to help people on whatever journey they want to go to, but I'm not like out there trying to be like, hey, I'm trying to win deconverts or anything like that from Christianity. But I also, I do, biblically iron sharpens iron. There is a sense where I want to be like, but Christians, you got to do better. You've got to give better answers than the theodicies that you're giving, because they're pretty weak.
Well put. And I feel you on that. I am trying to defang fundamentalism, but at the same time, in all of its forms. But, at least, I don't know, I think I think that there's serious walls that get built up, and it's something I'm trying to do. So thank you so much, though, for that super chat. Ultimately, I want people to value the literature as literature. That's something I'm trying to do. So Joshua Springer, thank you for the super chat. Did you put and? Oh, is this a scripture? And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. Romans 11:23. Love you, brothers. God bless. So this is kind of, they open the door, and it's available. Hey, I get it, man. You know what I mean? I get it. And respect. I also wonder, and I don't know if this is a worth topic bringing up, because in that mentioning of Ruslan, which you probably don't know who that is, it's a big YouTuber, Christian YouTuber. You may have ran across this stuff. He thought it was narcissistic of me to say that this was narcissistic. I had family members who sat around, and when we have these conversations from time to time, they're looking at me going, one day you're going to come back. You're going to get it. And I'm sitting here trying to explain to them, like, and I said this statement, I've forgotten more than you'll ever, like, you probably ever care to even read your Bibles. I've forgotten more about this than you ever have even known. And I'm talking about combined, because I know my family, right? So they don't really read their Bibles. They're not serious students of this stuff. And it's like, I felt like that was kind of condescending. That's probably the better word, rather than narcissistic. It's like condescending to go, Tyler, you're going to come back. Trust me, you're going to come back. And so, like, have you really walked through the process and understand what I'm saying and how it's actually making sense to why I don't believe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, yeah. I mean, again, it's like the whole, like, you weren't a true Christian. Like, I try not to take, it can be condescending, but I'm like, hey, I get within your system that that's what you think, and I just kind of cheekily point out, like, Romans 11:23 says that, if we don't persist, we can be grafted in. Hebrews 6 says, once we fall away, it's impossible to bring us back to repentance. So I don't know which one it is, right? I don't know if I still have hope or I'm just done.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you, man. What do you do? Constellation Pegasus says, you're a determinist? Then I'm assuming you know stuff about physics and astrophysics.
I know some stuff. I mean, I'm a determinist. Well, I'm a compatibilist, which is the idea that determinism is compatible with, freedom necessary for responsibility. Largely because I think libertarian incompatibilism is just incoherent. Right. I don't see how someone can hold to something like a principle of sufficient reason and still be a libertarian and say, it's entirely indeterminate why I choose the things that I choose. Because the instant I ask, why did you do that? And you start giving me explanations, you're giving me causally determinate explanations. So I'm largely a determinist because I think indeterminism and incompatibilism are just incoherent.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thomas Lehner, do you still pray?
Not really. I mean, let me actually backtrack. I still find myself like sometimes being like almost like talking to myself, but not to myself. I still do it every now and then. Mm-hmm. If something's happening, I'm like, okay, like God, I don't say God, but I'm like, oh, like, please let this happen. Something like that. But no, I don't like conscientiously pray.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I know that's a personal question, but JR Token, thank you for that super chat. I didn't see a comment. I'm just rolling through here. I don't like to leave people hanging. Shane Torres, if you're comfortable sharing, have you dealt with a spouse who still believes in how to maintain peaceful marriage?
I have not dealt with that.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate that. Henry Mars, has Tyler read the Book of Enoch? Thoughts? I
have, actually. One of my research projects I did was on the Book of Jude and its canonicity with regard to its use of Enoch. And so, I think Enoch is fascinating. I would probably have to revisit it. I wrote that back when I was still pretty committed, like not even really struggling with doubts yet. So definitely roll back, but yeah. So I've read. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, Henry. Jamie Russell Christian Middle says, speak to the resurrection of Jesus and belief 4. Thank you. I don't know how to answer this.
I'm not speak to the resurrection of Jesus. I don't think he did.
Yeah, you haven't brought us through some of the arguments that you personally, what I guess the best argument isn't what's against it. How do you make sense of what you think's happening there? If you're taking an approach that this didn't actually happen, what is your personal position?
I think largely, and I've said this, and this is probably kind of a crass way to say it and probably not the most helpful way to say it. But, people are familiar with, C.S. Lewis's Lord, Liar, Lunatic, and then potentially Legend on there. I think the category of what's happening, if you had to use those categories, is some type of blending of lunatic and legend. But I don't mean lunatic like Jesus was a crazy person. I think he was. I think he was an eschatological preacher. I think that he thought he was ushering in the end of time and all that kind of stuff. And I think he was probably sincerely mistaken. And then there was legendary development after that.
I'm with you. Now, how that happened from the get, like, did someone imagine that they thought they heard, or who knows? I mean, people have all sorts of beliefs and see things. Elvis Presley's visited people since dying. So J.R. Token, evidence shows Yahweh is not guilty of existing.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Spartan says, I'd love to hear more about Tyler, your current beliefs.
I'm still a classical theist, as I said at the top of the show. So I still believe in God. I still think that if a being like God exists, he still has those attributes of being. Because when you start doing a conceptual analysis of what type of being that cause would be, I think you do get something along the lines of omnipotent. Omniscience tricky. For a couple of reasons. Omniscient, I think, is the right term, but I don't think I would hold it the same way I did when I was a Christian. So, you have omniscient, omnipotent, transcendent. I don't think he's within space-time. Immutable, asse. And part of immutable and asse is because for a being that's outside of time, I don't see how process would happen or procedure would happen. And so I don't know what it means to say a transcendent being changes, for example. So there's conceptual analysis, but it's largely kind of the God of the philosophers, and I don't know what to do. I don't have I've realized actually that eschatology is more important than I ever thought it was, and I'm realizing a lot of the things that feel weird. And I don't know what to do with are things where having an eschatology answers it or solves it or satiates that need for something or some type of answer. So not having an eschatology is weird.
But you don't have one right now. Like,
it's just, I don't know what to do with it. Right. So I don't know what happens when we die. Do we die and we blink out of existence? Maybe. Do we reincarnate? I don't know. Having eschatology for decades, I feel an affinity for that, but I don't know if it's, I don't know if there's reason for that or if it's just, kind of a Christian hangover or whatever that is. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to do with that. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. T. Brown, deconversion came after years of studying and thinking. Is there anything you would say to a teenage Tyler to prevent conversion?
No, I don't think that I would prevent conversion. I kind of look at it as my life is my life, and it took the path that it did, and I'm happy where I'm at, and I have, if I hadn't gone through that, then I wouldn't have my children that I have right now, who I love, are my life. So I don't like living in the questions about what would you do to change
right?
Probably nothing.
At the moment, I guess at the moment, without factoring in what we know, then maybe, yeah. But it's like reliving a certain moment and not knowing, having no omniscience and being kind of an open theist yourself, right?
Yeah.
I probably would make different decisions, but the problem is I would have to know that I shouldn't make that decision when those things happen. Yeah. And therefore it kind of falsifies itself. It doesn't work. It cancels itself out. Yeah. So it's difficult to know how to answer those and that's my drug addiction phase, right? I caused unknown suffering to my family, to my children, to my wife. Do I wish that I didn't do that? Yeah, I do wish I never did that. I also have to live. I have to be me in this world that I live in. And so this is a tough one. But it's one of those I don't really know how to answer.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you for the super chat. Was Tyler predestined to leave Christianity? I'll see myself out now.
I mean, I think I was determined to leave Christianity.
Thank you, Mark.
If Christianity, if Reformed Christianity is true, then yeah, I was predestined for it. If Molinism is true, I was predestined for it. So
that's true. But the Molinism described by William Lane Craig, for those who, when he said a long time ago, I wasn't even a Calvinist at the time. He said something like, I think God preordains where people are born in the world. So that if they never hear the gospel and they die without Christ, he knew already that if they did hear it, they would reject it. So he had them born in places where inevitably they're going to go to hell.
Yeah.
This was his
trans-world damnation. You have any possible world that person never would believe. So he just took those cogs and put them. I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't know what it means that there's like platonic form, or like, it almost feels like a soul bank. Like is it the Jehovah's Witnesses that have the soul bank, or the Mormons? One of those. There's like the soul bank. He like plucked this one soul that would never believe anywhere and like put it somewhere. But I don't know what it means to say like an abstract soul wouldn't believe in any, because part of what makes
like, could God not make a world?
Personality. So
it's weird what you're saying. Like, making sense of that is like, that would mean that there's not a single world that the God of the universe couldn't make to make sure that they would be saved. And it's odd that you wouldn't put the responsibility somehow on that being who is the creator of these worlds, whatever world that may be. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Really odd. Boris says, my final try at Christianity started with 2 Corinthians 13:5. Do you know that passage by heart?
I don't know it by heart.
That is, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test?
Or in the KJV, and except ye be reprobates.
That's where we loved using that word. What was it? The 1599 Calvin edition? I can't remember. He had a commentary in his particular edition.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and blast through these, and then I'm going to allow you any eschatological final statements here before the end. Callan M, thanks, Tyler, for speaking. Helps folks on journey. Thank you, Callan. Appreciate that. I do think that your story is going to touch some people here and hopefully help people at least understand, even if they disagree, like understand where you're coming from. I think you've taken quite a sophisticated route, man. So I commend you for that, and I hope you continue on your journey. Theo Jansen, thank you for that super chat, says, in the first Gospels, Jesus does not seem to be out of time in many way, immediately this and that. So he's always immediately.
Yeah, like in Mark, it's euthus. It's immediately and then immediately and then yeah. It's that's more of a literary device, like to move the plot. The plot's it's rapid fire plot. It's going. He's busy.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Theo. Gray says past and current thoughts on Romans 1.
I mean, Romans 1 covers a lot of thoughts. My guess is the longer section on Romans 1, dealing with that you're without excuse. That's my guess, because that's probably the one that part of that's most relevant. So that, I mean, that section basically deals with that there is this kind of, apart from special revelation, you have general revelation, that just by looking at the created order, you know, people know God, his immutable attributes, his power, and all that kind of stuff, and they're without excuse. I generally think that we can infer certain things about God by looking at creation. Again, I'm a classical theist. I'm not sure that has the moral input. The thing that I find interesting though about it is now when I'm going back and I'm talking to my presuppositionalist ex-brothers, friends, still friends, ex-brothers, still friends, is they'll do like, well, how do you, if you don't have the Bible, how do you know, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to be like, one of your favorite passages is Romans 1. And your own, like if I just do an internal critique, your own view says that I can know these things by general revelation. I don't need this special standard to know to know about God and to ground certain things like the laws of logic, which, precepts love to bring up. Right. Mm-hmm. So why do I keep asking that? I still haven't gotten an answer. I was asking this while I was a precept. Even I started asking is like, why is the Trinity? Why is a Trinitarian concept of God necessary to ground the laws of logic? I can understand the argument. I still get there with like intentionality and stuff. How a God can ground laws of logic, but how does that get you to Christianity? This is one of those like Mott and Bailey things where I'm like, I don't understand how this argument that God gets you the grounding of logic or intentionality or whatever it is, or transcendental facts of reality, to therefore that the Christian God is necessarily true, and there's an impossibility the contrary to the Trinity. Like I don't understand that. And given your own revelation in Romans 1, we shouldn't think that either.
Interesting note on Romans 1, Revelation 1. Romans 1 is this is philosophical, and I guess because you find this kind of general revelation theme, and it is something that you find the Greeks and the Romans that kind of use this. They might find their way. Classical theists might try to go, see, even Paul kind of hints at this, but there's a lot more baggage than just classical theism as you're describing. And the baggage can be tested. There are claims there that can be tested and shown that just don't meet what would you say? The muster there. Notion Slave, what's your view on Islam as a possible next faith to investigate?
Not going to. I just no intention. It seems to me because Islam builds on the Abrahamic religions. It seems if I think the foundation is already wrong, why would I want to go stories up?
I'm with you. I agree, and that's straight to the point. Camille Gregor again. If you had a ranking of individuals who most contributed to your deconversion, whose names would be on the top?
I mean, not to sound cheeky or anything like that, but God's number one, right? So God could have prevented it easily, if that was true. As far as like scholars and academics go, Bart Ehrman was again, that was a flashpoint on a lot of those things. A lot of it was conservative scholars. I mean, Mike Licona, John. They'll hate this. John Walton, right? Michael Heiser, right? There are a lot of these scholars that they're gateway drugs. They're the things that have you start thinking about things differently and understanding text within their historical context, and start seeing some of those things. And honestly, the fact that there weren't these weren't people that like gave arguments for why I should leave, but I started struggling and having issues, and the best scholars, the best apologists and all that kind of stuff, the answers were just poor. The ones that came just weren't good. The theodicies weren't good. I mean, I've said it before, the free will theodicy is just nonsense, right? Because it says, oh, well, God, there's evil because God wants to protect free will. And I'm like, okay, but God can, in the philosophy of action, there's a difference between free will and outcome, right? So God can prevent 100% of murders. He can stop them at the moment that they're about to murder someone. They still would have freely chosen to murder, right? He can prevent the outcome. Has nothing to do with free will. The free will theodicy just does not work because it does not answer the problem. The evil is the outcome. The choice is evil in itself. Maybe there'll be minor evils. Maybe there'll be minor evil choices, but God could prevent every single harm to a child, every single murder, he could have prevented the Holocaust. He could have prevented all of that stuff without ever stopping a single free will choice. So, like those types of things, they just don't work. Like, and the fact that they're so ardently advanced as if they work, they're just, those types of things just started to eat away at me.
Thank you, Camille, for the question. Try to get through these. I was heavily involved with Mars Hill Church.
Sure.
It took way too long for me to escape that community. Any thoughts on that church and its influence?
That church was brutal, and it's really scary that there's basically part two, which is even worse. than Mars Hill, because Mars Hill at least fell under the banner broadly of kind of evangelicals before everything about Mark Driscoll was known. Now he has his other church that's even like, I'm not going to say it's a cult, but it's really close. It's really, really, really close from what I've read about it. If anyone is really interested, they kind of like these sociological, like storytelling podcasts, like This American Life. There's one on the rise and fall of Mars Hill that's fantastic, and that is a scary church. I'm glad you got out of that. That was a scary, scary environment.
Thank you. Gray says, I just got here, so forgive me if I missed it. But what do you think about all the historical evidence talk about the resurrection of Jesus?
I think it's interesting. I just don't think it. I don't think it accomplishes the conclusion that it wants to accomplish. I think they're interesting. I think the minimal facts argument is interesting. I think the maximal case for the resurrection is probably a stronger case than the minimal case in different ways. But I just think I don't think they get to the. I don't think they accomplish justifying the conclusion that they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. I'm not even going to comment because I want to make sure we can get to the end here. Thoughts on Jay Dyer, flavored pre-sup? Have you heard of that person?
I do know who Jay Dyer is. At Jay Dyer's best moments, he's good. He has a lot of worse moments.
Grace, thank you so much. Festering Boils, if there's really a God, why do you think he allows all these false religions to flourish among his creation? So in your view, this sounds more like, since you're a theist, do you think in your mind God gives a crap about what people believe?
I don't know. See, I don't know. There's no special revelation that tells me what God gives a crap about, right? So there is a sense though where I think that most likely what again, if I have to come with what's consistent with what I think is true, I think about it in the sense of my kids. I don't try to control everything that my kids believe. They don't all have to believe like me. They don't have to all think like me. I want them to be good, and I want them to thrive, and I want them to do well. If one of them ends up being a conservative, great. If one of them ends up being a Democrat, great. If one of them ends up being whatever the dichotomy is, that one is a Christian, great. One's a Muslim, great. Whatever it is, as long as they're like loving and kind, and that's that's what I'm going to be proud about. I can imagine some type of God being similar to that, where the doctrine might not be important, but the impulse for the thriving of humanity and the development of culture might be a good.
Okay, the time is now. We're going to test this thing. I'm going to give people, since you just tuned in, 10 seconds. Oh, it already refreshed. Holy smokes. Why does it do this to me? We're refreshing it. Screw it. 1.12. I don't know how many specific because it doesn't show me the details on your YouTube, but you got some subscribers here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tyler, I want to leave you with a final word here. You're speaking to somebody out there. Maybe they're going through a similar process, or they're considering it, or whatever. You're talking to the world here. Give them a final statement from you, if you will.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, and this was always the purpose of my endeavors in the podcast and the YouTube channel is always to think hard about things and to explore the thing. I mean, the freed thinker was a double entendre. It was about being freed in Christ, but I never understood the indoctrination and all that kind of stuff, because even though I had a ecclesiastical alignment, I always just questioned and believed what I thought the evidence lined up to, and that has led me down this journey. And so I'd keep encouraging people to think hard and to think freely and to keep exploring the evidence, and wherever that leads you, whether if that leads you deeper into Christianity, so be it. It's great, but to keep thinking and keep exploring and asking questions.
Keep asking questions. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Check out his podcast. He has the Freed Thinker podcast. And we have the Patreon. Help support us here. We're working our butts off. I've got so much content coming. You don't even know. I don't even know what to do with myself. I'm editing nonstop. We have courses as well. MVPcourses.com down in the description. A course right now on ancient Greek mystery cults, and they get kind of compared to Christianity in a way. Historical Jesus Quest with Dale Allison. Don't miss it. It's fire. I swear. Apologia just told me yesterday, he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how good this course was. So he's checking it out, and of course got an interview coming out with him soon. And then of course, Creating Jesus, why Mark's gospel is forgotten. I love educating the world, Tyler, and I love to learn myself. Yeah. And I think the more we have these discussions, the better. I hope to have you back in the future, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to come back on.
This was fun. And I'm going to do Let's do our outro, apocalyptic outro. Thank you, everybody. Hit the like button, share this content, show love to Tyler by subscribing. If you want to help support us, go to the description.